Just a little bit about myself. As that has been said already, I'm at TransCanada looking after a very large-scale GIS implementation that we just undertook a few years ago, and we are basing all our, mostly our solution on FME. And I just wanted to share some information about it with you and some of the pitfalls and some of the issues that we need to work around and how did we manage doing that. As for myself, I've been in this IT industry for about 20 years, a little bit over 20 years. Most of it I spent in the GIS stream, working with various GIS data sources and generating output from it. Now, as for the program, this is how we started it up. This was presented to us by the business, considering the large investment that they were putting up for this. And they came up with a statement of work that sounded like this, like build an enterprise-level GIS solution based on a multitude of data sources without disrupting day-to-day operations and continuously propagate changes that happen in the various subsystems during construction. Now, it sounds like a really overloaded statement and somewhat hard to achieve. This was the problem. Like, they decided to build something called a master data source, where all various data sources come together, and we are able to automatically somehow display and manage everything that happens. Some of it is like blend information, for example, for tax purposes, then corrosion protection data, that's engineering data for predicting pipeline corrosion and operation and planning operations for the future, then asset integrity, then manage the centerline data only in one place, but make it available to various subsystems that need to use it, that rely on. Then emergency management info with a lot of proprietary data like contact info, police officer's name and cane for emergency planning, and then various construction data. Now, construction data doesn't seem like a hell of a big part for a pipeline. However, at any given time, TransCanada probably has like 15, 20 construction projects in planning. Okay, and the next one. This is, I was just trying to give, it's a little simple diagram. I was just trying to give an idea what kind of data, different data sources that we are dealing with. Like our old system, we had an existing system that was based on an Oracle Spatial SDE implementation. Ironically, that was called GeoFind 7. Our current solution is called GeoFind 8. Really original, but that's what they decided to name it. So our old implementation was all Orion, and our new implementation is actually based on two separate database instances. One is for managing the data, like making edits for it. The other one is for display purposes, which is the MDM. Now you can already see like various data sources. Everything is operating in real time today. Some edits still happen in the old system. Some edits happen in the new system in the data management side. Everything needs to be brought together for the MDM for display purposes. Now, of course, how can we manage this? And business presented requirements to us that anything that happens on one of the subsystems, we wanted to see it at latest by next day. Like, data being up to date is really important for them in order to be able to make financial and various decisions going forward. What we've done, or actually I didn't want to move that off yet. So this is where somebody came up with a brilliant idea. Well, we have all these various data sources and everything and the requirements. How can we manage this? somebody popped up that, I heard about FME. I know it can do a lot of things. I know it can read a lot of data sources. Why don't we give it a try, give it a shot? So they started building workflows and everything else. Great, we can transform data from Oracle Spatial. We are going to SQL database. That's a piece of cake. We don't need to really do anything else, look at any other application. We can do it. Okay, you can do it, but now the scheduling part comes in. How can we manage that? Then somebody else said, well, we can employ FME server as well. We can do our scheduling, whatever is needed. It seemed like, oh, that's a perfect solution. We have all the pieces together. Let's just go with it. We started developing workflows. One workflow followed the other one as data sources are growing, and everything else. We ended up with like 150 workflows. Great, it does all the work that we need. However, we are running out of time. We only have a limited amount of time that we can actually do the synchronization, the data updates, given the fact that we are operating in 4 different time zones. That becomes an issue. This is just a look, some of the workflows that we have that run on a nightly basis. Just wanted to give you an idea. Yes, I mentioned this already. This is what the result looks like. Maybe I'm sorry if I'm jumping a little bit back and forth. Hope you're being able to follow somewhat. This is what the result looks like today. These are just purely just images, just to give you an idea what we are talking about. Now here is what I was gonna spend most of my time on, the problems that we faced. One of it is, I mentioned, the limited availability time window that we can do the updates. Because we looked at the issue and we determined that we really only have a 5-hour window that we need to make all this happen. Also, because the way things are set up, there is a lot of workflow dependencies that we need to address. Like we have parent workflows that parent workflows and some child workflows that rely on a successful completion of the parent workflow. What do we do if something happens? What do we do if something fails? How do we recover? The other issue is, because we are an enterprise system, there is some rules and regulations that apply. One of it is like any source code that ends up in production must be integrated with source control. Now, most of you here know that FME doesn't play nicely with source control at this point in time. Promise has been made. Yesterday I heard that they are working on it, they are looking at the issue, so hopefully it's gonna happen soon. Now, here are some of the solutions that we came up with. I'm sure a lot of you seen and heard people that FME is a great tool for POC, like proof of concept. However, employing it in an enterprise environment, it's slow. I heard that from a number of people stating this. Yes and no, and at the end of the day, I totally don't agree with. FME is, you can make it work really fast. However, most people will throw a workflow together and call it done because it can do the work. Well, that's just not good enough in an enterprise environment. What I found that for a successful workflow development, you gotta spend twice as much time optimizing your solution as you spend by building it. It's the same principles apply as with software development. Your first cut will always be just a proof of concept, good enough. But if you don't do the optimization part, you're not gonna achieve production level solution. So that was one of the things. We went back on all our workflows and looked for I wouldn't call them errors, but we looked for opportunity to improve them. And our success factor with it was probably about 70–80% reduction in reduction in time requirement for each workflow to run. This gave us great progress, or provided us progress. However, it just still wasn't fitting in the time frame. With all the workflows that we had that we need to run on a nightly basis, we were still at about 7-hour limit, which we just wasn't cutting into our 4.5–5 hour window. Then we called up SAFE, and some of their technical advisors said, "Well, have you thought about scaling up the servers?" It's like, what do you mean scaling up the servers? Because we just didn't know at that point in time. Well, you can add more engines to it. Okay, what is that gonna provide us with? Well, depending how you deploy it. Like you can still, you can add engines to your server at any given time. It doesn't necessarily give you any reduction if you don't start managing those engines correctly. Like if you still have one workflow controller and runs everything sequentially, you can have 15 engines. It's not going to do you anything. What we've done is, okay, we have the extra engines, we have the extra horsepower. Now let's figure out how to actually take advantage of them. We started submitting workflows asynchronously to the engines, which means that at any given time, all our engines are busy. They are running different workflows, basically running parallel. It takes a little bit of design work to actually make this happen, especially when you have workflow dependencies. So what we've done, we actually developed a workflow controller that uses a tree structure, starts out with the parent workflows, and based on their success, will run the child workflows. So potentially it could happen that one of the parents fail. We're not going to do the updates for the child windows. However, the parents that are successful will run their child windows. It might not be the optimal solution. We are still working on it. However, we can say that anything that we transfer over is guaranteed that has followed the tree, has followed the parent-child relationships, and that aspect of the data has been successfully updated. Okay. The other issue I was talking about is the source control. And I heard a number of conversations yesterday when I was in the training courses, that most of you see it as a must-have. It is true. However, there is a solution that you can use today to integrate your FME workflows with source control. Remember, it doesn't necessarily have to be FME that links into your source control. It can be a Team City instance, the project that's what it does. Links into your source control. It can build a zip as output from your latest revisions from the source control, and then you can just simply take the zip and deploy it. Simply take the zip. It's a PowerShell script, and you can deploy your FME scripts to the server at any given time using the REST interface. You don't really necessarily even need the desktop. Once you have your Team City build your deliverables or artifacts. Simple PowerShell script can actually take it and deploy it to the server at any given time. I actually heard this conversation yesterday that the issue with the database connections and everything else, this totally addresses it. You set up your connections once on the server in whichever environment, production or everything, and just by deploying the script, you're never overriding your connections. You don't have to do those repetitive work when you are using, or repetitive work when you are taking something off of one FME server with a backup procedure and deploy it to the production server. You don't need to do that whole process. So basically what I was trying to say here, yes, we did implement, or we did utilize FME as the backbone of our enterprise solution. And so far it has been working for us. There is still things that we need to address. However, we are planning to stay with it and build on it going forward. As a next step, I'm actually looking into integrating it with some real-time data, that control data that comes off our pumping stations and comes to the control center, and I see it as a perfect fit that allows me to actually accomplish it without very, very little effort. Here at the end, like, is the running joke, if I only have FME, right? What I was able to come up with is I can justify my wages if I have FME, and probably my managers too. So anyway, that's pretty much all I had to say from my own. If you have any questions, I'm willing to answer anything. Go ahead. Actually, we started from 9, and we are down to about 3.5. Okay. Yes. Yep. No, it's actually not the PowerShell that does it. I was sitting right behind you yesterday. If the job submitter asks you for authentication, it's not set up correctly. Make sure when you set up the job submitter, it's actually using one of your published parameters that can be controlled by a scheduler or anything else when you override it. You don't actually have to hard code into the job submitter anything other than, okay, use this published parameter, whatever you choose to name it. It takes a little bit of, how should I put it? Takes a little bit of self-control to actually make sure when you're developing your workflows that they have the same parameters, like database connections and everything. Then it makes it so much easier to chain them together, right? Because you have one scheduler that will pass in all those parameters to each of the workflows if those common parameters exist. Now, if you don't want to do that, what we ended up doing, because we already started from an existing base, we are actually using the REST interface to deploy these workflows to the server, where you can actually pass in the parameters in the command line argument. Does that answer your question, or is it like, main thing, look at your workflows and make sure that the job submitter doesn't have a hard-coded connection or anything to it. And demand from your developers, whomever they are, or develop some standards for them. It's like, these are the parameters I expect you to use, and this is how it's gonna be used. Just standardize. Oh, the question was if we considered using the notification services from the server to actually control the flow of the various workflows. Is that correct? We actually have, but makes it, after about you pass like 10, 15 workflows that you gotta chain together, it becomes really cumbersome to control it with the notification. Like it is easier. We basically have one input file list that contains 60 or 80 workflows that need to be run, and our job controller actually builds the tree structure from it and understands some control parameters. I can actually show it to you back home in Calgary. It's pretty slick. Like the question was, how did we implement it? The control, actually we implemented it, we designed it. We didn't use any external state controller. It's not hard. It's actually really easy to do. Once you sit down, like, I see a lot of interest on this job controller. Like, you can email me anytime and I'll call you back. I'll even give you the job controller if you need it, because there's really or I can put it up on the FME share. Like, it's really nothing proprietary about it. It's all it takes is a CVS input list with the list of workflows to run. And there's really, once you get it working, it's really nothing to it. It seems like, why didn't I think about this like 2 years ago? Does answer your question?
We probably have time for about one or two more questions before the next one.
I was wondering if you could expand on your comment or explain how TeamCity and FME and get integration. What is the specific use case you're trying to do? And yeah, I'm kind of interested in knowing more about in that particular integration.
Well, I can't really expand a hell of a lot of it. We're pretty much out of time. But basically, the way it works, wherever your Git repository is, just check in your FME workflows in directories. Just like a lot of you deal with .NET development and everything else that CVS or Git is being used, there is no reason why you couldn't put your workflows there. And when you run your TeamCity build, just have it built into the zip file. And once you have a zip file, there's various ways to deploy that. You can even use a simple FME workflows that all it does, reads the zip, determine what the FMEs are, deploy them to the server. It solves your source control issue.
Robin, can you go to your last slide and put your contact info?
If any of you are interested in this, as I offered earlier, I'm willing to share, because I believe this is the slickest thing that we've done. The way we chained everything together and we cut down our time requirement for doing all these updates. One more thing I want to add on it. Next thing I'm looking at it is actually to do an incremental delta on all these updates, because currently we use that nuke and pave approach, which has its own deficiencies in long term.
Huge
Anything
thanks
else?
to Robin. Excellent presentation.